And welcome everyone to another episode of the Saving Brothers podcast. And I'm always excited to have great guests. And today, well, another one of my great guests, and I would say a friend as well, Michael Trencher. Trench, welcome to the Saving Brothers podcast, brother.
Thank you very much, Phil. Great to be here. I'm really looking forward to today. And just can't wait to have a great conversation with you all about resilience. Yeah.
Well, I think really in the current climate, in the current world, it's such an important thing because we really are getting battered with a lot of stuff in the media, in the feedback we see and get from other people, in the way that they are dealing with stuff of what's going on at the moment. And I think it's such a challenging time. So, Trench, I thought, look, why don't we start? Back up a little bit, kind of like that program, This Is Your Life. Tell us a little bit about you, Michael Trencher, your journey, and what has brought you to this whole area of resilience.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, look, I've been involved in the business world for a number of years, and as you know, through banking and finance as a grounding. But through that journey, came across a number of small businesses and small business owners who have an enormous amount of challenges, both business and personal. And through that journey, moved away from the finance world more into the coaching and consulting initially, and then into coaching, and then more into personal coaching. Just understanding that there's so many challenges, particularly for small business people who where your personal and business lives intertwine, and how do you cope with that? And over the past year and a half, through some personal challenges that I've had outside of COVID, but from a family perspective, have really specialised my business and my coaching business into building and sustaining resilience. And as it's turned out, it's been it's so relevant relative to what's been happening to so many people. So over the journey, I've had the privilege of meeting and speaking with so many individuals and working with teams from all walks of life, and I understand that the challenges that many people face are very similar. And so here I am today talking to you about building resilience and hopefully imparting some of the insights that I picked up over the years to the Saving Brothers cohort.
I think a great place to start is let's define it. Let's unpack it. What do you think is resilience?
Well, resilience really is, I guess, the technical term is in the psychological strength to cope with stress and hardship that comes along, or if you like, that mental reservoir that you have to pull out when things get a bit tough. And it could be a variety of issues that comes to the fore, such as job loss, relationship issues or relationship breakdowns, through to bereavement as well, medical issues, illnesses, natural disasters, if you like, but also particularly relevant to the issues associated with COVID and what we're seeing today. So there's a variety of different issues that can create stress and hardship in your life. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is a number of those factors converging, creating an amplified series of issues for a number of people. The key to resilience, though, and most people who are resilient really have the ability to remain calm and to have that sort of toughness through it. And what people realize is that being resilient doesn't actually make the issue go away. The issues still remain. They're still here. We're still on lockdown if you're in Melbourne and Sydney, or other places of the world. If you've got other issues in your life, those issues don't go away. They're still there. Resilience is really your ability to cope with those issues and to get you through to the other side. And I'll talk a little bit more as we work through today's conversation around what that looks like in terms of building resilience, because the good news is you can actually build resilience. But the question is, how do you go about building it, and then how do you apply those techniques and those things that you build to help you cope with the situation, to help you get through the situation. If not necessarily make it go away, it can help to make it go away, but it can at least help you get through it.
Why do you reckon, Trench, some people are more resilient than others?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. Excuse me. Some people just have a natural positive outlook on life. So they just have some natural traits that they draw upon from time to time, and that comes about really from a view of themselves, or a really positive view of themselves, or a positive view of their abilities. So it really can come down to that natural sort of inklings or natural leanings towards being positive. A lot of people that have resilience already view the world in a different way. So they have this, and you may have heard the expression over the years, this internal focus or internal locus of control, where people take responsibility or understand that what they're feeling comes from themselves, as opposed to an external locus of control where they feel that things are being done to them. So people who are resilient tend to look at things internally and say, you know what, I can actually change some things, but I can certainly change the way I feel, rather than having that feeling that, you know, well, what happens out there is being done to me. So, for example, if you take the COVID situation, okay, we're in lockdown. Some of our controls have been taken away from us. We can't do certain things, right? And it's, you know, it's against the law to do certain things in some respects. So that control's been taken away when we get that. You know, but how do you cope with that? Okay, well, you know, it's your view on that. You might have an opinion on it, which we all do, but it's how you go about your daily life in relating to what that external control on you means to you versus what you can control internally and how you feel. So it's a combination of things. And I think people who are resilient, why are some people more resilient than others? I think they actively work at it. So it's actually a work in progress. And, you know, even I'm sort of involved in this for quite some time. I consider myself a bit of a work in progress as well, because it's a continual journey, a continual learning experience as to how can I get more and more resilient, particularly in light of some of the events that have occurred in recent times, where you know, it's called upon all of our strengths to push through you know, what we're all facing.
I think one of the things about resilience is about optimism. So if you are a optimistic person, the glass half full rather than glass half empty, I think there really is a natural inclination towards, okay, this has happened. All right, what can I control? I can control some things, such as how do I choose to respond to a situation rather than react, and take there's a lesson in this for me. What is the lesson? What could I have done differently or better? And when you have, I think, an intrinsic optimism, or what Martin Seligman would say, learned optimism, then I think you're going to find that those people, I think it would be a really interesting study. The people that are genuinely optimistic are going to tend to be a lot more resilient. Would you agree?
I completely agree. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Martin Seligman, have to say. Yes, the word you use there is really crucial: choice. You can choose. Exactly. So you can wake up in the morning and you can choose one of two things. You can choose one this way or that way. And it's how you choose. So to say some of these things are outside of our control. It's how you choose to react to those particular issues. And some of them are big ticket issues, by the way. You know, there's lots of trauma in a lot of people's lives, not just COVID and lockdown, but through life, you have some major trauma that happens. And, you know, and it's hard to make those choices easily, but certainly having a choice of being optimistic and looking at what you can, you know, how you can frame a particular issue is crucial. That's absolutely right. So, yeah, great observation.
Well, I think myself personally, when I had cancer at 47, diagnosed with prostate cancer, and you hear the C word, and without telling too much out of line, your family's had to deal with a cancer story, of course.
Yes, absolutely.
But I chose, there you go, I'll use that word again, Trench. I chose that. What is in this for me? What is the learning? What is this teaching me or challenging me? And I actually used it as a kind of like an out-of-body experience, like I was in a movie and I was observing myself and my attitudes and my behaviors. And as bizarre as this might sound, in a lot of ways, whilst it was challenging, I actually enjoyed it, because it was a test for me. It was kind of like a holy grail. This is something that I'm up for. And I took a really optimistic, positive approach that, right, Phil, you've been given cancer for something. There's a lesson here for you. And I was always of the opinion, mate, of let me seek that out. What is this teaching me? And it taught me resilience, I think, and optimism, and that it will be okay if you feel it's going to be okay.
Well, that's a perfect example of the internal locus of control. An external force. Well, you had cancer, which was from inside you, of course, but you didn't, it happened to you. You had no control over it as such. But then you went internal and you said, okay, well, how do I, and you actually almost went to the extent of being so self-aware that you actually were looking down on yourself and saying, okay, how do I, what am I going to do with this guy, being you, and then working through it. So that's a perfect example of having an internal.
I think it's a really good example of or even how was I dealing with the challenges of a divorce and no longer living with my two sons and missing my boys and dealing with the guilt. That was a time that for me to get from that journey back in 2018, Trench, to get to a point where I moved out of a beautiful big family home into a one-bedroom apartment because I felt guilty about spending too much money on rent coming out of the family pool of funds, that in a way I was punishing myself. It's quite interesting, the psychology I find around that. I'd like to dive in. How do you think building resilience help all of us?
Well, there's a few components to this. I think building resilience, if you can build resilience, it'll give you strength to go through the various issues that you're dealing with. And the way that you can do that, the way it best can help you is to, first of all, frame the issue. So to put a framework around it. It sounds a bit of a cliche to say put a frame around it and so forth. But when I say that, I mean, where does this sort of fit in your life? What's the frame around it? And how can you contend with what you're facing? And then in the same breath, put it in context. So, what does that actually mean? What are you going through today? And what's the context within your life? So, for example, if we're thinking of lockdowns, and that's topical at the moment, so I'm sort of honing in on that a little bit. But what is our current lockdown situation and everything we're going to go through in the context of 5 years from today? Hopefully it'll be a thing of the past, and we'll be living, COVID-free, or in a world where it's not anything like today. And I'm sure it will be. We're finding that already in the first, in the next few months. So contextualizing with the issue, putting a frame around it, and putting it in context. What that does, it actually allows you to then create some clarity around what the actual issue is, both in terms of what the issue is, what it means to you, but also in terms of what it is that you need to do to contend with it and to cope with it and to build up your resilience towards it. Okay. And if you can get those concepts right, or even just that thinking right, and this isn't some sort of, major thesis or something, it's simply just sitting down over a cup of tea or a glass of wine or something and just saying, okay, what does this mean to me? What's the frame around it? What's the context? And can I see this problem clearly for what it is? It allows you to then to plan. And if you can plan your way out of it, that's fantastic. And as I say, it doesn't necessarily mean to plan your way to change it, because that issue still may stay the same. You may still have the same emotions. You may still have, some anxiety. You may still have some grief. You may still have some frustration or anger or whatever the case. They may be there. But by doing all the things I just spoke about, what it allows you to do is put it into a place where you're better able to cope with it and be more resilient towards it. So that's how building resilience can really help you, understanding what it really means to you, but also really recognizing that the issue may still be there and your emotions that may still be there, but it's how you deal with it that you can change.
Yeah, so it's all about how you can build resilience. I'd like to ask you this question. What do you think are some of the misconceptions, though, that surround resilience?
There's a few. I think the first, if I can put a scale to you, and I know you like your scale out of 10. out of 10, how you doing today, brothers? Which I know it's a great question. If you think of the scale of -10, 0, and +10, okay, for the context of what I'm about to talk about, one of the first misconceptions is that if you change a negative situation, that will lead you to a state of well-being, right? And that's a misconception. So if you've got a negative situation, say if something's happened and you're sitting at, say, a -8, right? If you can contend with that and either change the negative situation or change the way you feel about it and so forth, a lot of people think if I change that, I'll be happy, I'll be calm and content. And the misconception is that's not really the case. All that does is really bring you back to zero because you've addressed the issue. Being happy, being calm and well-being and all of that sort of stuff requires ongoing building of resilience. And so therefore, changing a negative situation doesn't necessarily give you well-being. It brings you back to where you are, which is, in inverted commas, normal or average or neutral, or you've removed the issue, or at least you're dealing with the issue in a way which you can cope. Actually, having well-being requires an additional set of positive talk and so on and so forth. And I'll give some tips a bit later today around that. So that's one misconception, is that changing a negative situation gives you well-being. Similarly, if you reduce negativity, another misconception is if you reduce negativity, you can actually cope more effectively. And once again, that's not necessarily the case. If you change or move that dial from -8 or -9 to 0, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're coping more effectively. It means that you're getting yourself back to a place which is, where you could be. But in terms of setting yourself up for future issues that might occur, that's something that also needs to be worked on in terms of, positive self-talk, hope, optimism, all of those things that we touched on a bit earlier. And similarly, once again, if you use that scale of -10 to +10, a lot of people think that correcting a weakness or changing something that's weak, that you perhaps have is a weakness in your system or in your thinking, optimizes performance. That's not the case at all. So if you think about, in a sports analogy, say for example, a professional tennis player who takes some time out off the circuit for a year, and their strength might have been, for example, their timing and their placement. Right? They've taken some time out. They're now no longer match fit. So they need to so their weakness is their fitness. They get back to being, totally fit again. But at the same time, their strength hasn't been honed. So they're still not where they used to be. So in terms of, where you're coming from, it's being in correcting a weakness does not necessarily create great performance. It just gets you back to where you are. So there's a lot of misconceptions about, if I fix what's here, I'm going to be right up here again. And that's not the case. And that's why a lot of people get quite disappointed to say, well, that's fantastic, and I feel like I'm coping, but really, I'm not really truly happy. Happiness and well-being and so forth also requires an additional effort to take you there. So with resilience, that's a few misconceptions that come into play, because a lot of people think, well, I'm coping really well, but my life isn't really, where it should be. And that's the reason why. So when I work with a lot of my clients, what I do is I make them understand that, or help them understand that, but then also help them work through, well, what is it that you need to do to then take it to the next level and create that level of happiness or whatever it is you're looking to achieve.
And I would have thought your coaching is really something that can be applied in your personal life, but also in your professional life.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So for example, if you look at, correcting a weakness, that last example, correcting a weakness makes you perform better. When you think about it in business, if you've been in a corporate environment, when you have a performance evaluation and you walk into your boss and they go, you know what, we've got an hour. They'll spend 5 minutes talking about the things you did well and 55 minutes talking about the things you didn't do well and working on that plan. Now, correcting that's great, but playing, they're not playing to your strengths. They're just correcting your weakness. And so in business, it's so true. That another misconception, actually, and that also applies to business, is that, weaknesses deserve more effort than strengths. Because if you correct your weaknesses, strengths take care of themselves. I actually have the reverse view. I take a strengths-based approach to my coaching, and that is that if you've got something that you're doing well, do more of it, and the weaknesses will come along for the ride. if you correct a weakness once again on the 0 to 10 scale, and then the 0 to 10, the -10 to 0 scale, if you correct a weakness, you just get yourself back to 0, right? You're not at +10. So play to your strengths and everything else comes along. So that's a misconception as well, fixing a weakness. So in business, similarly, like you say, in business, if you spend so much time working on fixing things that are wrong in your business, sometimes you forget about doing all the right things that have made you successful in the past. So there is definitely some crossover between personal and business, and particularly if you're a small business or self-employed, that crossover really does sort of converge quite heavily.
And I would have thought right now, more than ever, globally, Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, that the whole area of resilience, particularly if you are self-employed, that you can't, in a lot of industries, we know that with lockdown, we haven't been able to conduct business in a way that we would like. Restricted trading hours, restricted face-to-face, restricted amount of business that can actually be done. And that does require a lot of resilience, in fact, just to be able to cope with that day to day, Michael, to be able to get through that. And also, I think you need resilience in this time of a lot of uncertainty around people's sustainability of their employment. So much flux at the moment.
You're right, and I think, and the expression which I don't really like, but pivot. People are saying we have to pivot.
Yeah, I'm seeing that word. I'm with you, mate. And the other one that gets me in Australia. I don't know what the rest of the world is like. We're all in it together. What a load
together. That's right.
That is. Well, some are more in it than others.
Some are more in it than others. That's right. We're definitely not all in the same boat. Put it that way.
No, that boat's leaking and sinking.
Yeah. So with the pivoting or the adapting, if you like, of your business, you're right. I mean, as you touched on a bit earlier, so I had a personal situation in my life, and when that happened during lockdown, I decided that I was not going to work at all and be the carer for the few months that I was required to do that, and that was the best thing I ever did, because I woke up in the morning and I was free, and I thought, okay, I'm not putting pressure on myself in a lockdown situation to deal with the person I was caring for, and that worked. For me, that was the perfect coping mechanism. I just felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I pushed through. That in itself, putting a frame around it, putting it in context, gave me clarity, and I actually completely changed my business model. So I moved away from doing some of the coaching to do a couple of other things on the side, which were completely outside of my area of expertise, and just had the time to explore it and had a bit of fun. So yes, this lockdown, this pandemic and so forth has affected businesses so much and personal lives so much, but it has also, I think, made us all reflect and look inside to find out, what's really important, and also find out, just how resilient we are in some cases. We talk here today about building and sustaining resilience. There's been so many stories that I've heard around people who have found things within them that they didn't realize they had, which has been amazing, and they've coped, just as a natural tendency that's come out without them even realizing they had it. So, yeah, it's been an interesting case study over the past couple of years. Fingers crossed, it's all going to be finished soon.
Well, I think there's no doubt when you deal with adversity, we really do discover what we're made up of or what we're made of, and inner strength that often people will think, gosh, I didn't think I had it in me. But when push comes to shove, or you just don't have a choice, you can be resilient and you can learn about how to become more resilient. In fact, I'd ask you this, Michael, some tips on sustaining and building resilience. Can you share some thoughts around that some of the brothers, could actually take from a practical sense straight off the bat?
Absolutely. And these are the ones that I use, so I'm more than happy to share them. There's plenty, but the ones that I use. The first one is I have what I call a personal. This sounds a bit sort of out there, but a personal coping mantra, or you can call it a personal coping statement. So, for example, when things go wrong, we all tend to have default statements that we make to ourselves. I'm not good enough. This always happens to me. This again. Why me, or whatever the statement might be. It's a little thing that you say, and it may not be but it's almost this reinforcement. This inner voice in your village, which can either whisper to you or scream at you, depending on what's happening. And in some cases, people even hear their parents talking to them and all those sorts of things, right? So there's a natural default that actually happens with a lot of people when things go wrong. So the way I go about it, and it happens to me. So and it happens to everybody, when that happens to me, when I hear myself saying that, and that can be just, a simple thing through business or through a personal situation. When I hear myself saying that, I have written down a couple of personal mantras that I say. I catch myself saying it, and then I stop myself and I say something back, which is my personal mantra, and try and counter what's happened. And over time, that has really sort of become a habit of mine now. And a couple of the things that I would say to myself have now gone away. And I've developed a more positive and optimistic outlook. So having a personal coping mantra or a personal coping statement or two when things happen is something which can just over time just naturally just change your mindset and move you into a more positive frame. Another tip that I can give the brothers is that to extract strengths from your problems. So what I do is we talk about the strengths-based approach. I've listed a list of all of my strengths, what I believe are my strengths. And when there's an issue that I find a little overwhelming or confronting, actually I physically go to that list and have a look at that list. And I go, well, how can I apply that strength, which I know I've got, which is demonstrated over the years? How can I take that strength and apply it to the problem? Now, the actual act of just doing that itself, for me, minimizes the problem immediately because it contextualizes and puts a frame around it. And then when I actually do apply the strength of it, it actually does work most of the time. And this is not a rocket science. This is not 100%. These are things that work. It doesn't always work, but these are just some tips. But certainly applying your strengths to a problem and understanding what your strengths are, it's just a good discipline. And I'm finding now over the years that I've been doing that, it becomes natural. So I don't have to go to that list now. I go, oh yeah, I've been here before, and I know what to do. And one of the key things around resilience is a thing called self-efficacy, which is every experience that you've had in your life to date has led you to being here today, right? Whether you like it or not, you've had ups and downs and really great times and not so great times and doubts and happiness and all sorts of things. That's all brought you to today. So part of that strengths exercise is, if you want to expand that, is to say, okay, well, what has been my life journey? And think about all of those sorts of things. And how did I get through some of the situations I got through? What were the strengths that I dealt on? Because you probably did that anyway without even checking a list. Another coping mechanism is, and it sounds intuitive, and I know that you really do this every day, Phil, is to spend more time in nature. Nature does center you. It actually does. When you're out there, you can't help but see trees move. You can't help but hear birds chirp or see dogs run around and whatever. And there's no secret that in all the jurisdictions in the world during lockdown, letting people out for a period of time each day has been a common feature across the whole of the world, that you're allowed out as part of the lockdown protocols, because people realize getting in nature and just getting out is a really, really important thing for mental health, but also, just to help that positivity and so forth. Moving from what I call a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. So now that's a little bit more, that requires a bit more of a conversation, but just as a general rule, whenever a situation comes before you, try and look at the opportunities that it can present, the challenges that you can rise up to, the curiosities it brings, what can you find within yourself? So your example, for example, when you were diagnosed, you looked at yourself and you said, okay, well, this has happened to me. What are the things that I can look within myself to help me contend with what this is? That's definitely moving from a fixed mind. You could have said, you know what, I've got cancer and I'll just get fixed up and that'll be the end of that. But you said, no, I'm going to look down on myself and I'm going to say, what does this mean? How can I what can I find within myself? And you looked at all those sorts of things almost with, probably some curiosities as well. So moving from a fixed to a growth mindset is really important. And the last thing I can just say is, particularly with COVID, stay off the news and try and stay off some social media, not this good social media, but other social media which is negative. So just a few tips and techniques that I employ myself. Yeah.
Well, I think you're absolutely spot on. There is something, two things that you said there. And one is getting out in nature. I get out every morning. It's part of my routine. I've done it for a couple of years, at least 3 years, where I walk every morning. And sometimes I might listen to music or a podcast, but quite often a lot of my inspiration, my ideas for my business, for Saving Brothers, have come about. Keep Five Alive, the whole Keep Five Alive came about going for a walk. You're right about the birds chirping. There is something special, particularly if you can do it in the morning and get out and just, I often just don't even listen to anything other than I like to listen to nature. And I go for a walk. I go down to my local cafe. I see the same people. I say good day. We have a bit of a laugh, put our masks back on, then drink our coffee and go for a walk. And that is just a really healthy part of my routine. And that's probably helped me to build some resilience, Trench. I've maintained for the last 10 weeks, 3 days a week, I do weight training, core and glute work. And I've got a nice habit going there. So half an hour, 3 days a week has been fantastic. And work. And I think another thing that helps you with your resilience, I reckon the diet.
Oh, yeah. Look, sleep. I mean, I didn't touch on, I just gave you some tips, but certainly sleep. And I know you had the sleep specialist on recently. Sleep, diet, exercise, all of those are given. They all help you, balance up your whole well-being. But certainly diet is really, really important. Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
We're talking about some of the positives of building resilience, but I think it'd be good to focus for a moment on some of the things that can tear down your resilience. And if I can start off, you already mentioned it, some aspects of the news and social media. From us being in Melbourne, Australia, so I get notifications that the health minister and the premier of our state are coming on the TV. As you know, they come on in Australia, in Melbourne at 11 a.m. I find that something that drags me down. I also am very careful what media I watch or listen to or who I surround myself. So I think there are people that actually they can suck energy away from you. And there are activities and things that can take energy away from you, which can then damage your resilience. So I think it'd be good for you, Trench, to touch on some of the things that we should avoid that can inhibit or knock our resilience around.
Well, yeah, for sure. And certainly I think the news is definitely one. I mean, we need to know the headlines. Of course, we need to know what's going on, particularly at certain milestones. So what I do, you're right, in Melbourne, we have the 11 o'clock, press conferences around the country. I watch those only when I know that there's a particular announcement happening for a change about to come, so we know what freedoms we will be granted or what will be taken away. So I watch that. Other than that, and I only watch it for the first 5 minutes just to get the headlines, as it were. Literally don't watch the news at night time anymore at all. And in fact, some of the other media shows, the current affairs shows and so forth. And I do that. Funnily enough, even with social media, I pick and choose what I look at, and I try to stem toward more positive commentary. I was fortunate enough recently to this is before lockdown, to attend a session with someone from Facebook, a very senior executive in Facebook that managed one of their divisions, and she was saying that even Facebook have recognised that the individual scrolling down when you scroll in isolation can be extremely negative. That's why they really promote the Facebook groups. Because you have that level of community. So just scrolling down in isolation, particularly if you're seeing what Facebook shows, which is a world of happiness and constant likes, if you're in a negative mindset, that can amplify that negativity as well. So, just be very selective of social media. What I'm saying sounds in a perfect world, it's not always easy to filter these things out. But certainly those two mediums are really crucial. The other thing too is, just, I wouldn't say stay away from negative people, but if people are negative, once again, just because you need to talk to people and everyone's going through their own experiences, and particularly with Savvy Brother, we all reach out and we want to hear from other people, which is absolutely fine. But just make sure that you have some self-care and put some quarantines around yourself to make sure that you don't take on what you're hearing, that you can be there and you can assist, but you can be somewhat detached from those issues. Otherwise, if you take them all on, that can also bring you down. Human beings have a negativity bias. We have that from our very beginnings, and so when something's negative, we can easily fall into that and become negative. And it is, like I said, that -10 to 0 to +10. Getting from 0 to +10 takes an effort, and it's very easy to slip back, into a negative mindset. So they're just a few things that I tend to employ, and I try and coach my clients to employ as well. The other thing too is, if you are feeling quite down, talking to someone. Now, of course, if you need professional help, absolutely. Whether it's a psychiatrist, psychologist, counselor, social worker, whatever the case may be. But sometimes talking to other people who are going through the same thing as yourself. So, for example, this lockdown in Melbourne, this is our 6th lockdown. And I think most people coped, from what I can understand and what I'm talking to my friends anyway, coped pretty well with the first 5. But this one seems to have really been a problem for a lot of people, more than anyone else. They just seem to be really having a real struggle with this particular one. And it's funny because, talking to a number of people, they've actually all admitted that. And when you hear people talking like that, you actually realize, well, you know what, you're going through the same thing that I'm going through. I thought it was just me on this 6th lockdown, but apparently it's you and you and you and you. And when you have that almost that safety in numbers, it makes you realize that, for a small period of time, we are a little bit in this together, in that context at least, but that helps as well. So that can also help with removing some of the negativity to say, well, we are going to get through this together, and you can sort of lean on each other within reason.
It's interesting. I heard the term recently. A friend of mine said, "How are you going, Pete?" He said, "I've got pandemic fatigue." Interesting term.
Interesting term.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. When you said the first 5 lockdowns, we kind of bunkered down and said, all right, well, we've just got to do what we got to do. But we got to the point now, I think a lot of people, particularly because we are, I think, the 2nd most locked down city in the world. And what are we up to? Almost 220 days.
220, 230 days out of the year, yeah.
And people are just exhausted, emotionally exhausted. And so it really has tested the bounds and boundaries of our resilience. And hence, I think it's so important to get around people that are generally optimistic and see the good, the positivity. I think you've got to be careful of those people that I would call them dream crushers. I've used this term for a lot of years. It was actually a term I heard many years ago, Trench, from Zig Ziglar. He talked about getting away from people with stinking thinking, as he called it. And that is just be careful who you do associate it with. Sometimes you can't avoid negative people or negative commentary. But if you're hearing that quite regularly, that will weigh you down. So again, I think really important to get around more positive people, and just even some of the things where you talked about the feed on things like Facebook. I've actually made personally, and I'm feeling so much better about it, rather than always be going to my phone and picking up my phone, mate, and going da 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 da, and scrolling through, as you say, through Facebook. I've actually really stepped back, and I'm not on social media wanting to comment on everybody's posts all the time. One, I found that exhausting. I think it's a lot of, no disrespect to friends and people out there, but I find that it's not particularly productive. And I don't necessarily need to see the latest picture of someone's cat or dog on Facebook. I liked the idea of Facebook when it was people catching up with each other and sharing something of great value, but there's a lot of rubbish on Facebook. So I think actually having less time on devices and social media is a way to actually take back some of you, empower yourself, And perhaps take that, whether you listen to some positive music, you listen to something positive as in information, be it positive like a Tony Robbins or a Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, or any of these sort of people, Wayne Dyer, but doing something that's uplifting. And I think the more you do that, the more likely you are going to be able to build on creating some building blocks around creating more resilience.
I agree. I think, if you can get yourself really busy and take your mind, it's almost like a form of meditation. So, you said this morning, every morning you go out for your walk, you listen to the birds, the trees, coffee, catch up with a couple of people. That's almost a form of meditation. Your mind is being, that's actually mindfulness. You're actually getting in there and you're doing that, and your mind is being focused on all of that, and everything else goes away. Similarly, if you do that scrolling and the social media, your mind does just go straight there. Whereas, if you're listening to and doing something productive, whether it's playing a musical instrument or learning a language or something, you're actually making yourself busy and you're taking your mind away, because when you don't have those distractions, your mind ruminates, because your mind will always tell you a story. And because we have a negativity bias, that story usually can end in a negative place.
Yep.
Whether it's at 2 a.m. or whether it's at 11 a.m, it's, it can be a negative. So removing the opportunity for your mind to wander into those places and giving it something else, such as a positive, whether it's music, as you say, or a podcast or motivational speak, whatever the case may be, very, very, very good for your mental health, and definitely good for your resilience. Remember, building resilience is not just an overnight thing. It's a constant reinforcement of all the things we've spoken about. And we've only just touched on them really, but just all the things we're talking about, it's a constant reinforcement of those things to build it up over time. Yeah, and bear in mind, you will have your times where you slip back a bit too, of course. But it's that continual effort to keep it going, which then affects, some really good positive mindset change.
But I think the more resilient it's almost like you build up a bank of resilience. So when you have those challenging times, you can weather that storm so much better. With your coaching, Trench, you're mostly going to be with Saving Brothers in terms of one-to-one coaching. Would that be right?
Yeah, one-to-one coaching. We're running just to put in the final touches on a downloadable course, which will pop up on the portal. But it's essentially one-to-one coaching. This isn't a group thing because it's such a personal topic and such a personal, internal, concept for everybody, that it's not one for a group, group coaching or anything like that. No. So
Now you're also a Saving Brothers ambassador.
Yes.
And I thank you for that.
Tell
me, what is it that you hope to bring to Saving Brothers as an ambassador? What was it that attracted you to want to make a stand for men?
Yeah, look, it was really, after I spoke with you and getting to understand the journey, I've had some, my own health challenges as men in at our age have had. So, that whole bringing that awareness of men taking care of their health, which, as you know, we don't do and traditionally haven't done a very good job of. We're getting better. So bringing that awareness to everyone, and just, being able to help anyone that's reaching out on a variety of different things. What I liked about the health, self, and wealth, it's across all gamuts of the lives of men. So it's not just one dimensional. It's got a broader base, a broader reach, I guess, in terms of what Saving Brothers means and what it can bring to the community. So it just ticks so many of the boxes that I've been trying to do in my own little world, and it just really allowed me to be part of a bigger community, but then also allow my messaging to reach a broader group as well. So
brilliant.
It's just positive all around, and I commend you on what you're doing, Phil. It's amazing work.
Thanks, Trench. And I think I'm really very fortunate to have people like yourself and a lot of wonderful people, men and women across the globe, who've been involved with Saving Brothers. And a lot of the people are behind the scenes. They're mentors to me. I have lots of conversations with different people who give me ideas, feedback, things that we can do better. And we're always looking for feedback from brothers on things that they would like us to be able to bring out in the future and as quickly as we can. Trench, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you today.
Thank you.
as
Same
we
here,
head
Phil.
into another weekend where we're actually allowed to go out and have picnics tomorrow.
We can have
believe it or
picnics.
not.
Looking
Bizarre
forward
as
to
it
the
is,
picnic.
though, folks, that in Victoria, our state here, we'll be allowed in groups of 5 from 2 families to be able to go out for a picnic, to have water, but no alcohol. So that is absolutely quite bizarre. We have to be resilient with that
We
one.
have to be resilient on that one, that's for sure.
We like a couple of grogs in the park, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We do
But we
indeed.
do. So, Trench, have yourself a wonderful weekend. Trench, don't forget, keep 5 alive as always, brother. Look after yourself.
Thank
And
you,
I'm
and
sure
thank
we'll
you,
be
Phil.
speaking very soon.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you and to the brothers as well. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome, Trench. Take care, brother.
Okay, take care.
See you,
Bye-bye.
buddy. Bye.